Hey, how's it going, guys? Mr. Boss for the win here, and in today's Grand Theft Auto 5 video, I'm going to be talking to you guys about a really cool cut mission from Grand Theft Auto 5. It was actually a Strangers and Freaks mission that was really in-depth and was one of the funniest sounding missions, I think, that would have been in Grand Theft Auto 5, and it was actually cut at the last minute and didn't make the final copy of the game. Now, this information is available thanks to the very talented Vadim M. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. You should definitely subscribe to him if you are not. He posts a lot of interesting content if you're a big fan of GTA. So big shout out to him for actually making this information available. And like I explained earlier, the mission Mrs. A and Mrs. B is a cut mission for Franklin, which actually has 5 different encounters in total. It's a Strangers and Freaks mission, and as you guys know, those are some of the funniest ones in GTA 5. So essentially, the plot starts with Miss A and Miss B. They were close neighbors who badly hated each other, and Franklin's objective on these missions was to help them humiliate each other. So he kind of had to deal with Miss A, and he also had to deal with Mrs. B on how he was going to help them humiliate each other. So in the very first encounter of the mission, Franklin meets Mrs. A, and he actually decides to help her and help her get revenge on her rival Mrs. B. So Franklin actually has to visit Mrs. B's house, wrecks her car with a melee weapon, and he then has to drive the car into the sea, essentially totaling it, and that's the end of Mrs. B's car right there. Now, for part number 2 of this mission, Franklin actually has to meet up with Mrs. B. He feels sorry for what he has done and wants to help her get revenge on Miss A. She tells him that Miss A is proud of her garden, so Franklin decides to actually urinate in her pool. So on the actual mission itself, Mrs. A's husband returns home to see Franklin near his pool. He calls the cops, and Franklin must then avoid, run away, and get rid of the cops. Now, on the third part of the mission, Franklin finds Miss A crying on the sidewalk, and they both decide to drive around the neighborhood and spread some bad rumors about Mrs. B. Then the mission takes the plot twist where Franklin takes the wheel while Miss A was bad-mouthing her rival, Miss B, through a megaphone. And funny enough, if this mission wasn't cut, this would be a place where we could use the megaphone, which of course has actually been found in the files and was supposed to be originally used as a weapon. This would ultimately make sense if Franklin was required to use this, meaning he would likely have to select it through the weapon wheel, and that would be how he actually uses the megaphone. But since that mission is cut, it doesn't look like there was another use for it in game, and thus the megaphone actually never came to Grand Theft Auto 5. So the fourth part of the mission is where it really starts to get interesting. This is where Franklin decides to help Mrs. B by using Mrs. A's husband as a target. So what he does is he basically takes Mrs. B and Mrs. A's husband to a local bar. He gets them to seduce each other because they already kind of have a thing for each other. They have a crush, they have a fling, whatever you want to call it. And after a while, they become pretty closely connected. Franklin takes a photo of the scene, so he kind of sets them up, takes a photo of it, and sends it to Mrs. A. And really, that fourth encounter leads us to the last part of the mission, the fifth encounter, where I'm guessing this all starts to boil over. Franklin is walking down the street. He sees Mrs. A picking up some garden shears, when suddenly Mrs. B appears to be holding a golf club. The two rivals begin to fight each other, and this is when you get the choice. Franklin can either sit back and help, or he can watch them kill each other, and that's pretty much it. That would have been the entirety of the mission. So basically, Franklin has to deal with 2 crazy women, and at the end of all of it, he gets to decide whether he wants to ultimately help them or just watch them beat the crap out of each other, which is probably something that I would have done because these ladies sound awfully annoying. Now, interestingly enough, in 2011, there was a cast list found. It was codenamed Rush, and a lot of people believe that that was related to Grand Theft Auto 5, that was the cast list for the characters in that game. And what's unique about this cast is that you can find both Miss A, who actually turns out to be Mrs. Avery, and you can also find Mrs. B, who turns out to be Miss Bell. Now, we have descriptions for each one of them. Miss Avery is a neurotic soccer mom, homemaker, 48 years old, anxious, and added on painkillers, very angry at neighbor Miss Bell. Whereas Miss Bell is a swinger and mellow Californian divorcee, 45, ugly, but comfortable with herself. So although these ladies were actually planned on being in the game from the very beginning, they were cut from the final copy of the game and actually cannot be found in game. There are no other files that indicate that they were supposed to be in the game and have since then been cut. So again, very interesting to see this mission. It looks like that all the fun stuff seems to be cut from Grand Theft Auto 5 at the last minute, unfortunately, but I still think this would have been pretty cool. Who knows, once again, if Rockstar has intentions of using this down the road for some story mode expansion or a single player DLC, I guess we're really just gonna have to find out if that information does come out. I'm glad you guys are liking talking about the cut content. I did a video the other day talking about some cool, crazy stuff coming out. Once again, be sure to check out Vadim Im's channel in the description. He does some very awesome stuff over there. If you did go on to enjoy the video, a like rating would of course be awesome. And also subscribe to my YouTube channel if you are new, where you like daily Grand Theft Auto 5 videos like this. With all the way, guys, like I said, thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.